Hey, you guys, I'm going to attempt today to explain the unexplainable. I started thinking also about a schedule. I know that I'm one of those people you can never push down to a schedule. I'm kind of here, there, and everywhere. I've always been like that. I'm extremely organized when I'm working, but I'm extremely disorganized in every other facet of my life. So for me to commit to a schedule is a big thing. Now, while we have COVID going on so strong in Costa Rica, I am not going to church. My husband is going to church. I am not. I am just done with it until COVID dries up here. Right now, we're having 2,000 plus cases a day in a place the size of Wisconsin with the same population. And that's unacceptable. So, what I'm going to do from now on my Sundays is I am going to every Sunday explain some little aspect of fundamentalist life. My husband teases me every time I start talking about fundamentalists. He starts singing, "Won't you take me to Fundy Town instead of Funky Town?" And we get a big laugh over that. He struggled so hard with the patriarchal thing that I thought that would be the first thing I'd start with. And particularly since everybody asks me about that a lot, that seems to be a popular one. If you've never been part of one of these groups, these high demand religious organizations, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about unless I explain it and break it down. And we were talking about this a little bit yesterday in my Katie Joy thing. Every Saturday, I'm going to explain something about Katie Joy that came from Patheos, that she's doing something a certain way and making claims. Yesterday, that was about how she decided to call herself a journalist, where that came from, the genesis of that. And today is going to be Fundamentalist Sunday. So anyway, what is patriarchy? Well, I went and looked it up. I went and looked up what the official dictionary thing is, and it's a system of society or government in which the father or eldest male is head of the family and the descent can be traced through the male line. On a governmental level, it's a system of society in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. That second one, combined with the first one, and there were more other explanations, but those are really a good explanation of patriarchy in fundamentalist Christian religion, be they quiverful, evangelical, or identify as theonomist, or anything else. Well, what it is each time, it's man above woman, and the cat is playing with a tin can. So, one thing I've noticed in the years that I have been in Quiverful is that most of the men who are attracted to this theology, well, let me back this up. Most of the time, a lot of times, it's the women that drag the men into these fundamentalist high. Hey, thank you. Thank you, small town Jewel. Wearing a blouse I don't always wear. Most of the time, you have women dragging the men into these high demand religious organizations, and the men are not always altogether for it right away. But once they start seeing the benefits, they get entirely with fundamentalism, with this patriarchal desire. No. My cat's trying to get on the computer. So these guys, they tend to be weak guys. They tend to be weak men, weak. Very, I hate to use alpha and beta and all that, but they really are beta males for the most part. They tend to be quieter, weirder. They tend to be guys that don't get along well at work because they're always busting out the Bible. They're guys that have no power in their personal lives, who cannot assert their masculinity in any way, shape, or form successfully. A lot of these guys don't do well in work environments. They end up getting fired a lot, or they have these weird interpersonal problems. because of their fragile grasp of masculinity. So when the wives haul them into this crap, they eventually discover man is king. The father is the king of the family. There's no greater explanation, and hey, Noel, or thing of explanation than to read the demented ravings of one Vaughn Ohlman. He used to have a site called Let Them Marry, and before that he had a bunch of other sites. I mean, a pile. And he's a theonomist. He believes that the main father is controller of the entire family and exerts that control to a scary extent. One of the things that he believes in is the whole courtship model. He married off his children that way very quickly. He married them all off. He only had 4. And he even would go to the point of having a bride price, that the father would pay a bride price to the father of the son marrying. He had some pretty crazy ideas, and they all revolved around him being in control. Another one that is good to research if you want to know how crazy this toxic masculinity could get and what patriarchy looks like is Larry Solomon of a bunch of different sites now, but his main one, biblical gender roles. Guys in this very tight little stricture, they believe that there are specific roles for each gender. Noel, I would say this is within the last 30 to 50 years tops. This is something that's newer. They come up with the one, they ignore the scripture that Paul said, where he said, men and women, submit yourselves one to another, which I think is more balanced. When you're married, you're going to have to be accountable to your spouse. I don't care if you're man, woman, or whatever you call yourself. You are going to have to submit yourself in ways that you may not want all the time. And you're going to have to figure out a way to work within that framework. And I'm not talking about the kind of fundamentalism these guys are talking about. Biblical gender roles believes in a scarily tight group of beliefs. He believes in polygamy of all things because it's in the Bible. He believes in controlling a wife to the point where when his wife misbehaves, he has stated in his biblical gender roles that he's withheld her pain medication and other vital medications to control her. He advocates men stripping away all, I'm going to call them these days essential appliances. Anything that helps a wife, he recommends you strip that away if your wife is, quote, disobedient, unquote. Basically, she gives you any grief whatsoever. In patriarchy, they believe that you have no right to your own sexuality. In other words, you can never say no. You have to do like Lori Alexander advises, 5 minutes in lube every single time, which is kind of scary. And not only is it scary, it takes away from women. Well, and I had to laugh about this. I got a story for you. It takes away from women any ability to have any kind of sexual anything, to have any sexual desire. Oh, yeah, Noel, this is extremely real in the U.S., and there are churches that teach this. I was fortunate our church wasn't so much on this, even though I knew people there who were doing that. It wasn't preached from the pulpit at all, thank God. Knock on wood. So, story. Okay, Lori Alexander, I used to write about her a lot for NLQ, for No Longer Quivering, for my column at Patheos that I did almost 10 years. And because Lori was always coming up with toxic things, she still is to this day. I see what's going on. I quit talking about her last year when she redeveloped a brain tumor, because I don't believe in picking on people who are sick. And I don't know how much of her insanity is coming from the tumor in her head or how much is coming from her theology. So I gave her a pass. It was kind of funny because right after I said that, her husband, Ken, this is toxic patriarchy. Ken, yeah, she's on Twitter. Ken contacted my husband and told him to control me, to force me to stop talking about his wife. And I'd already announced I was going to, because I don't want to poke anybody with a brain tumor. I just think that's tacky. And could not determine how much of her bad theology was coming from the brain tumor and how much was coming from what she actually believed. So he contacted my husband. He wrote this long screed about how I was defaming her continually, and how if my husband was a good Christian, that he would control me and force me to do better. First of all, my position as a writer with Patheos was to examine that very theology. So he was telling my husband to control what my career was, to the point where it was scary. Second of all, we don't have that kind of relationship. We didn't even have that kind of relationship when we were part of an evangelical church. No, not at all. So he wanted my husband to control me. My husband took one look. Why did I stop writing? I'll explain that in a minute, small town, Jewel. My husband took one look at that, and this happened to be a night when he had been suffering from the flu, stomach flu, some kind of stomach virus. And we had been feeding him soup and ginger ale and the whole 9 yards all week long. And a couple days, I should say, he said to me, as he got it from his computer, he said, "Some lunatic named Ken Alexander just contacted me about you and told me to control you. Go deal with the..." And then he said a couple of very imprintable words then. So I did. I tried to reason with Ken, and I actually said to him, I said, "This is my career. This is what I'm doing." I said, "But because of the brain tumor, I had backed off, and I wasn't going to say anything more about her at that point. And I'm definitely not, even to this day, because chemo, radiation, all of that is no fun. And I don't want to pick on the sick. I'm just not going to do that. So long story short, I told him, I said, "I am blocking you. My husband has no desire to speak to you. Please do not contact us ever again." And I posted the entire conversation up at NLQ, still there, no longer quivering, of the time Ken Alexander told my husband to control me. Yeah, my husband did kind of laugh over that, because it was pretty ridiculous. One of the things that Ken was saying were ridiculous. They were just ridiculous things. And Ken fits the pattern of weak men that don't have much control in their lives, that the wife controls a lot of things, even though she's claiming she's submissive. His wife is not submissive. She complains, she says she is, but I don't think so. But she also had some issues that were such a level of control that anybody would have problems with her at all. One of the things that she wrote in her book is that during their wedding reception, she had a problem with the fact that he was eating Ritz crackers with cheese on them, because she thought that was toxic prepared foods. Now, granted, a lot of prepared foods are not good for you. They taste good. I can't eat a lot of them. But me not being able to eat Ritz crackers is not me telling the world they can't have Ritz crackers. Damn it, I wish I could. But in Lori world, that would be a big no-no, whatever she doesn't like. So apparently she nagged him pretty seriously for like 20 years or so before reading B. Pearl's book, Created to be a Helpmeet, and changing her entire theology. What's interesting about the Alexanders is they're not allowed to teach in church, okay? They've been through a pile of churches in their area, their San Diego area, where they have their home. They have lots of money. They're wealthy. So a lot of the advice that Debbie gives, I mean, not Debbie. Debbie's dirt poor. It's a big difference. That Lori gives is geared towards upper class women, that most of the women I've known in Quiverful and in these evangelical, very fundamentalist churches, there's no way they could ever follow her dictates, because they have no way of doing that. And it is crazy. It's super crazy. Now, all these guys, like I said, they believe they control everything in the family. They believe they control the wife should have dinner on the table as they're walking in the door. It doesn't matter how late they are, how early, whatever. They control that. They control what the children do. They control everything. And the circles of control get tighter and tighter the more it goes along. I have known women at my old church, Bible study, we're having a conversation about whether your husband should control whether you have a bowl of oatmeal or a blueberry muffin for breakfast. That they have that level of, they call it submission, it's really control. It's control of women. I don't know why anybody would want to be married to a submissive, smiling robot with no thoughts of their own and no ability to express anything. My mom always wanted to be a pastor, but was told women aren't allowed to lead that way, evangelical. Yes, Noelle, that happens. That happens quite frequently. They don't believe that women should be allowed to speak in church. I saw this at my old church when my girlfriend Joni got up to speak, and Joni's pretty damn awesome, even though she still is evangelical. We sometimes will knock heads over theology. She is not submissive, not in the least. And but she's quite sweet. She loves God in a way that I've never seen before. She's good for her husband, but like me and Jim, they're a partnership. They run things as a partnership, not as the master-slave dynamic that you see a lot of these relationships in Fundy Town. The control that the men start to exert over the women, after a while, it goes sideways, and usually people have some kind of breakdown and leave. Or the wife decides to divorce the husband. There was a very tragic case of this that we saw in LQ when we were following a lady named Carrie who was doing these things and writing a blog. It was really interesting. Her blog was actually quite interesting. She had all kinds of good like sewing projects and things. But she had this kind of theology. Well, years later, she left this man and they lost a child. And it's very hard when you lose a child to keep your marriage together. It just is. And she had the world looking at her over the loss of the baby. It was a tragic situation all the way around. So they ended up divorcing some years later, and it came out that the husband had been extremely abusive towards her, physically, financially, verbally, in just about every way. Though to read her blog posts back when she was living that lifestyle, it was just the sweetest spirit of submission around all of the things. And look, I'm not saying don't give in. There are times you're going to have to give in. One time I ordered this really huge metallic cover for our deck. It was quite expensive. It was like $3,000. I ordered it from Costco. It was delivered right to the house. My husband didn't want to do that. And so we looked at the instructions on this thing. We didn't open the box. We just looked at the instructions and started having a conversation. And it came out that he wasn't comfortable with the idea of putting this complex thing together. And we were going to have to hire somebody. It was going to be expensive. So he ended up sending it back against, I didn't want to do that. But it was one of those situations where I realized that to continue on and to insist that this is what we were going to do was going to create problems for my husband. So I went ahead and sent it back, and I'm glad I did. That was the right moment to submit. And there are times when our men will submit to us, and that needs to happen too. So it's really submitting to each other. Paul said that. He said, submit one to the other, and that's true. If something, especially, I don't care about it. And I don't try to police his eating at all. He's a grown-ass man. He can police. He likes junk food. I don't know how he's not diabetic. That's on him, though. I let him do his own thing. I don't nag him and try to feed him a salad like a certain fundamentalist tried to do her husband for many years. And she led him to secret eating in his office, which is really crazy. So if you listen to Debbie Pearl, too, in her Created to Be a Helpmeet, she pushes and promotes this level of submission as well as a lot of the other ones. Larry Solomon, he takes it to gross levels, mostly involving sex. He actually has a website that's all about his ideas on sex. He thinks women should give sex anytime the man wants. There is no reason a man should bother giving a woman pleasure. Oh my God. And it's like, dude, if you would give the woman pleasure, she would have sex with you more often. So these weak, whiny, substandard males, they're embracing this, and it's turning them into little petty dictators. Small town Jewel, that's exactly right. I left fruit out. I left cut up vegetables to make a salad. I left a Post-it on the fridge. I knew I was probably going to be a useless thing. And it was. He didn't eat any of that. I had to toss all that out. Oh, well, it's just, fruit and vegetables. He didn't eat any of that. And while I wasn't happy that he didn't eat any of that, I'm not policing what he's eating. I'm just offering him different things. He's always complaining about his weight, but he won't he won't stop. He won't put down the junk food. And I'm not going to make him. I feel like your husband is you. No, my husband is you. Oh, I'm sorry. So I don't want him developing some kind of mental block in his mind about eating. I struggled with that as a child because my mother, God bless her, she struggled with her weight. In our family, nobody is reed thin. Nobody. And I think that's just the way we're built. The size I am is the size my great-grandmother was, the size my grandmother was, the size my mother used to be before she started starving herself and not eating. So I think there's so many things that play into this. And in Fundamentalist town, you're not allowed any of that. One of the things that Larry Solomon has preached about is that you control what your wife eats to keep her the size you want her to be. Small town Jewel, I can't affect him. I just make the offers and he does his thing. And I think someday there'll probably be a reckoning at the doctor's office, and they're going to have a come to vegan Jesus with him. I have a feeling. Put down the junk food. The stuff he eats anyway, I can't eat because of my allergies. No, well, I'm convinced of that now. I'm convinced of that because I have a weight point that my body always goes to, always. Even when at one point I went on Meridian, lost over 80 pounds. I got really thin for me and I looked great, but it took drugs and denial to get there. Okay. And I could not maintain it. So I have a different philosophy now. I eat till I'm full. I stop. I've lost a little weight doing that. Who knows if I'll lose a ton. So that's where it is. So, but if you're Larry Solomon, you tell your wife you have to maintain a weight of 110 pounds and you start weighing them. There's that level of control in some churches too, because my old church, the pastor would weigh us on worship team and encourage us to lose weight because we were representatives of God up on the platform, and he wanted thin people who were good looking. So there was conversations about weight, what we could wear, all kinds of things. It didn't go well. So I hope you guys can still see me. My connection is not, yeah, it is sane, and it's insanely hard to get this theology out of your head. Like I was saying yesterday, making a healthy meal for your family because you love your family and you're concerned with them and you're the only one that cooks well in the family is not patriarchy. It is patriarchy if that's what your husband demands, and he demands it be waiting when he walks to the door. That is patriarchy. That line is so thin. You can still see me. Good, 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 good. So that's what's insane about that. And it's a total control of everything a woman does. That's what patriarchy is in these types of churches. It's that bad. So I want to talk a minute about the thing you asked me, Small Town Jewel, why I quit writing for Patheos after almost 10 years. Couple of reasons. Patheos got out by BeliefNet Media at some point. Before that, we were owned by Time Warner, and we were part of the Time Warner family. Before that, we were all independent, contracted to Patheos, and Patheos was a small platform. So when Patheos was not a small platform, and well, actually through my Patheos years, through Time Warner, I was making a decent amount of money. It was a godsend for me because my asthma was so severe and my mast cell was. A good example was one day I was at work. I was working for a big national corporation, and my desk was the farthest one from the company kitchen. Somebody microwaved, what is the name of that dish? I used to Kung Pao. They microwaved a pile of Kung Pao, which is made with peanuts. By the time the smell came across this giant building and hit me, I started having asthma. So it was little things like that that drove me into writing in the first place. And that's why I ended up taking over NLQ from Vicki Garrison, because Vicki had health problems that prevented her from writing all the time. So I took over from her when I was having all this stuff. Well, yes. And at the time, it was crucial that I worked because I had two children in college at the same time. And I don't even want to tell, my husband worked for the federal government. He made a good salary. I don't even want to tell you what penny pinching went on in those years. But my kids were both in school at the same time. They're both in college. And it was fine when they were both knocking out their associates at our local community college. I made them go there. It wasn't so fine when they both moved on to George Mason at the exact same time. Then we went on this crazy tight budget, and I wasn't having much yarn money at all. So there were times I actually worked two jobs. There was times my husband worked two jobs just to keep the money flowing while they were in college. Tuition at Mason is high. When they were both there, having a room on campus, a dorm room, was like $1,200 a month. At one point, we sat down with them and figured it was easier and cheaper for them to live off campus. Oh, thank you so much, Jackie, for my yarn fund. I'm going back soon and buy more yarn. So it was a tight time for us. So I knew not working was not a thing. Well, by the time that BeliefNet Media took over Patheos, everyone's wages had dropped. And where I was making something that was comparable to the salary I was making at the organization I work for, by the time BN Media took over, you were lucky if you got $500 a month. And you're paid entirely on clicks. I think they figured out to do clicks at a lower rate. We all signed new contracts. There were things in the new contract I did not agree with. It basically said that anybody connected to BeliefNet Media, you could not criticize him. Well, there are people that are connected to BeliefNet Media, like Pat Robertson, that I'm just going to continue to criticize. There was some words said that we couldn't criticize the president, I was told at one point. I don't know how true that is. Hey, thank you, Noel. You think I really appreciate that. You just don't know. I'm getting more yarn. So anyway, they cut our wages. Our wages went down to nothing. And part of the problem is everything has moved away from the written word. That is lesser and lesser important. Fewer readers are reading. More people are turning to YouTube and other resources. When I hit 60, I started thinking, well, I don't agree with the contract I had to sign. There are things that I'm extremely uncomfortable with. My wages have fallen to almost nothing. So why am I torturing myself doing this? And I was a daily columnist. So I was writing usually about a 1,500 word document every day. And that's really hard to do. It's kind of like, I've related it to making sausage. Okay. I would rather, I would rather write fewer pieces for no money or very little money or other money than be locked into a column. That's what it came down to. I started looking at my life here in Costa Rica and saying, I have it pretty nice here. We're out of the financial woods that we were in when we had both kids in college. Yeah, yeah. And I'm working on various books too. And the thing is, just on PayPal. Okay. I got to make sure, small town Jewel, I got to make sure that it's valid because I'm in another country. So anyway, I started looking at that and thinking, do I really want to be locked in? I had the starts of like 3 books. So it's like, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. 10 years is long enough in any platform. I've built my reputation. People know that I'm honest and truthful about everything I do, even when I make mistakes, I own up to them, which I got to own up to one in a second, and go from there. So I thought about writing a book about, actually, I decided to write one about the Carol Ann Cole case. I have that finished, but I'll never publish it because I've come to realize that sometimes you do more harm than good with these real life true crime things, and her family is in a lot of pain. I'm not going to exacerbate that, so I'm going to just hang on to that. So I started writing about my time in my old church. I'm writing a book called A Quiverful of A-Holes. That's the working title. It may end up being something else. Every day I record whatever is going on in the world of Katie Joy with the idea for writing a book. And I've started writing a book about my move to Costa Rica called How Not to Move to Costa Rica, which is why my YouTube channel is named that. There's one problem. I've gotten enmeshed in the Katie Joy drama, which I'm only going to speak of on Saturdays. I'm going to debunk one thing on Saturdays. So I have decided that I'm going to do that. I'm still going to do YouTube. Don't worry about that. That I can do, but I'm going to spend more time working on a book. Now, I have had some health issues that have really played into this too. And that was the other thing. When I was at Patheos, I had a stroke. And I still continued to work Patheos, even though I was recovering from a stroke. And I have to tell you that brain injuries bring a level of fatigue like you've never felt. This last time I've experienced this, I experienced it the first time I had a little mini stroke. It was a little tiny mini stroke. And this last one was more serious because it was in my thalamus. So I want to enjoy my life. I want to walk on the beach. I don't want to be tied down. Right now I have an article that I'm going to publish through John O. Pierce, a tippling philosopher. I have articles that I've published on this whole Katie Joy thing, the things I've learned, the whole theology of victimization and like group dynamics. I published those under a pseudonym at various psychological platforms. So I'm still writing, and I do have a couple of things I write under a pseudonym because I don't really want it traced back to me. But my serious writing is always under my name. So there's that. So I'm going to finish my books up this year. That's my big goal. Finish the Costa Rica book, finish up the other one, finish up the Quiverful because I got the stories. Like the time our pastor fell through the ceiling, the time the kid talked about burning his porn and how many times a day would masturbate. And everybody in the church just started to feel like, oh my word, oh my word, oh my word. Never have I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me before. Small Town Jewel, I use my Kindle all the time. And it'll be in paper and Kindle. I'm going to go ahead. Small Town Jewel, I'm going to have to. Part of the problem too with the book is I wrote a series of 23 articles for Patheos about the murder of Carol Ann Cook and the suspects and everything. I went to turn that into a book, and I started looking at the evidence. And I had, unlike Katie Joy and others, I had 2 banker boxes full of documents that I pulled from the Louisiana State Archives and other places before I even started writing. So I went back and looked at everything, and I came up with a completely different theory of her death this time. I don't believe that she was necessarily murdered by somebody at the troubled teen home. Now, I have had a ton of people that have come to me and given me their stories of their time at troubled teen homes of the Independent Fundamentalist Baptists. That's another possible book. So I need to get my ass in gear and ignore Katie Joy 99% of the time. That's really what I need to do. Because the problem now is I get online and I fall down the Twitter hole. You know what that is like. You get on Twitter, and now watching this whole thing with Chrisley knows best. It's just fascinating. I find it all fascinating. So I'm taking all these notes on these things, but I really need to get my butt in gear and just do these things. So there's that. Carol Ann Cole was found dead in an area where there were oil pipelines running through and piney woods. There wasn't much back there. And she was found wearing some clothing that seems like it came from one of the local IFB troubled teen homes, in particular New Bethany. New Bethany denies she was ever there, even though she was wearing some of the things. Nobody really knows for sure what happened to Carol Ann Cole. The police have pinned it on a dead man. They've pinned it on, well, first they tried to pin it on Henry Lee Lucas, who admitted it. And because they were driving him around, feeding him at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, he was admitting to all of these murders. He was in Florida in jail when Carol Ann Cole was murdered, so it was impossible. It's Carol, Carol, Ann, Cole, Cole. Her sister, Jeannie Phelps, is still dealing with the hurt and pain. So I'm not going to add to that. I've come to the conclusion that she possibly died at the hands of somebody involved in sex trafficking, because so many of the girls that I've talked to who were incarcerated, and I'm just going to call it that because incarceration, what was done to them, and it was evil, talked about the sex trafficking that went on out of that place. And where it is in Bossier City, the Bossier City, Shreveport area, you have major intersections of interstate running through. And you got to factor in the FBI even has their own division that all they do is investigate truckers, because a high number of truckers have been serial killers. I mean, you look at all of that and it's like, what other conclusion can you draw? Now, I started fighting with a true crime blogger some months back because she announced that the knife that the guy who's dead used to stab his mother-in-law to death was used to kill Carol Ann Cole. There's no physical evidence of that whatsoever. It's irresponsible to even claim that. You could list it as a theory and say, this is what I think happened and this is why. But to come out and declare it closed is irresponsible. Irresponsible as can be. Noelle Johnson, it makes me sick too, these things. And I don't want to add to the family's pain, so I'm not going to publish a book. I will say that a lot of the people connected with these things have demonized a lady by the name of Teresa Fry. Teresa is a wonderful person. I've talked to her many times. She is a wealth of information on cults, on these IFB things. She knows it all. She's smart. But law enforcement has decided to deny anything she said and to demonize her. So here's my rant about true crime. So if you're, like I said, if the family is fine with it, go for it. If the family's not fine with it, don't touch it. And the sad thing is there's so many things to write about out there. And I do miss writing daily. I'm going to say that. I miss that. So I need to channel that and finishing my books up. One of the things that stopped me in the Costa Rican one is COVID has changed everything. It's changed how you come here. It's changed the requirements for being here. It's changed who can be a resident. They've loosened the residency requirements, but they are still the biggest, hardest to immigrate to countries in Central America. There are countries here that you just have to arrive and be here 6 months. And they say, okay, you can be a resident now. Costa Rica, it's not. It's hard. It's difficult. It's expensive. It requires 10,000 documents. We're getting ready to try to do it again. We're talking about it. We started trying to do it once before, and COVID hit, and our application was kicked out. So there's that. So all of that has changed the landscape of what's going on in the writing world as well. So that's why I quit writing for Patheos, because I could no longer support what they were doing, and they weren't paying anybody. Which makes Katie Joyce claims that she was making thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars from Patheos rather pathetic. I don't believe it. I don't believe it in a heartbeat. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go Sunday morning. I need to scrub down my bathrooms. I've been very remiss in cleaning since I got back from my trip, giving everything a lick and a promise. I got to clean today. I will show you guys the air conditioner. I came back from my trip and there's blood. There's a blood drip. So I'm afraid to open it and take out the filter, but I suspect I'm going to find a dead lizard. Okay, love you guys. I'm going to go ahead and go. Next Sunday, I will cover another subject.